Time for some more kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe, at your kitchen table here in Amherst. Before we get into what we're going to talk about, which is we learned about the birth of the moon last week and how what birthed the moon is still lodged inside of the Earth's core. I want to talk about Bob Dylan and at Springfield Symphony Hall last night. You were there. Your thoughts on the Dylan show?
Right. So first of all, I mean, I should have said, that I went to see a Nobel laureate yesterday.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right. And so, I think he's 80. He's still rocking. And, I've seen him a couple of times before. And I have to say, with my dear apologies to Bob Dylan, about, you love the lyrics, the stuff that he has written. You just love it, right? But then in live concerts, they're oftentimes, especially in the last 15, 20 years, the words just get drowned out, and it's very hard to hear about what he's saying. So I kind of miss the lyrics. And but his last album, Rough and Rowdy Ways, appropriate for an 80-year-old, by the way. And it's a ruckus album. I love it. The couple of really nice blues songs on there. And so I really wanted to go and see. And he's also 80. I was like, you never know.
Could be your last chance.
Right. So I did go, and it was packed. It was Springfield Symphony Hall, and the first couple of songs, I have to admit, and I hope you don't put it on the radio, but what I'm going to say is I was really wrestling with this idea that maybe it's all a big, long, practical joke that Dylan is playing on sort of it's going to come out posthumously published autobiography in which he says, I just made stuff up and made sounds and people just loved it. So first couple of songs, it seemed like I couldn't even tell, even though I've listened to his last album also, I knew kind of what he might be singing, and yet I couldn't identify the songs because of the way he was singing. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a long night. However, after I think 3 or 4 songs, he has this, I think it was one of the really wonderful songs, False Prophet, on this new album, which is bluesy and things like that. And it seemed like it woke him up or something. And then the words also, got clearer. So I don't know if it was because deliberately the first 3 songs were like that, or maybe there were tweaks to the audio controls, or he himself did that. But then it was actually really wonderful. And his band is actually really nice, and it's a ruckus time after that, but he played most of his songs were from his new album. And so if you are looking for big hits Tangled Up in Blue or other thing, nope. The only I think one of the songs that he sang was You Gotta Serve Somebody. And other than
that,
that,
pull from the Christian album of all things.
That was interesting, yeah. But it's again with the band, it worked really well, and he also had a couple of songs which are in his newer album, which is a reinterpretation of his older songs. So, for example, he didn't play that Forever Young, which is a great new interpretation where the way he's singing now, it means very different when you're saying Forever Young than when it came out the first time. And so he had When I Paint My Masterpiece. And so there are a couple of songs from the old ones. But overall, after, I would say, a couple of songs, it was really a lot of fun. But he doesn't talk much.
No. Did he say, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the finest musicians in the land? Every time I've seen Dylan, that's all he says to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the finest musicians in the land. That's
right. And he was playing piano, and he was into it, really standing up. And so that was, I was just waiting for him to put his leg up and sort of really go after that. But so it was a lot of fun. But again, even on his last album, the lyrics are just amazing. So his writing is still spectacular, and he's pulling no punches. He is going after people. So I think it was wonderful.
Well, Bob Dylan is like a rolling stone, and so is Mars, which is like a rolling stone orbiting in our solar system.
Wow.
Who's older, Bob Dylan or Mars? No, I'm just kidding.
Wow, that is, so, and one of the things that we talk about Mars is that it doesn't have a magnetic field, but Dylan certainly does.
Yes, he
He
does.
is magnetic. So I wanted to, in some ways, do a part two of the conversation from last week, and you don't need to listen to part one in order to have make sense of part two. But last week we talked about the formation of the moon and the body that hit the Earth that created the moon 4.5 billion years ago. That was nicknamed Thea, or named Thea. I guess it doesn't have a nickname, Thea, and we talked about the fact that we now know that part of Thea is inside the Earth because there are these big pieces that and the reason why we know that is because we can actually study the structure of the inside of the Earth through earthquakes and we can figure it out. So there is a recent paper that has come out that now also has modified our understanding of Mars's interior. And of course, we are interested in Mars because, as we mentioned, Mars doesn't have a magnetic field. It used to, but now it doesn't. And that's a puzzle regarding that. And so there is a sort of like a lander over there. It was called the InSight, or spacecraft, you can say. InSight, a lander, an instrument that was there from 2018 to 2022. And it was there to measure marsquakes. And again, because these kind of earthquakes or marsquakes are really important because you can actually get information about what is inside the planet. I mean, so this...
It's like shaking up a present on Christmas morning. I think I can guess what's in here by the way this present sounds.
Yeah, I mean, and to a certain degree, but this is amazing, right? I mean, like, that if you say, okay, well, what's inside a planet? Well, you cannot dig through it. But scientists figured out, I think in the 1920s and the early 20th century, that if you have an earthquake, if something shakes, so as you are talking about the Christmas present, the seismic waves, these waves are going to go through, and depending upon what kind of material there is, the waves are going to speed up or slow down based upon those properties. Or, for example, in the case of the Earth, we discovered that Earth has a solid core, inner core is solid, and the waves are going to get reflected back. So you get this amazing information purely from the shaking of a planet. And so it was really crucial that what we figured out, sort of like, what is inside of Mars. On Earth, we have, because there are all these earthquakes, and so you can actually figure out the interior, but we didn't know much about Mars. And so this InSight lander, that was designed to do that. And it detected many of marsquakes, and those are much smaller than compared to the Earth, actually. They are relatively smaller. It detected those. And what we found from mapping those marsquakes was that it looked like that it has a liquid core, and it's a little bit bigger in size than expected. And that was a little bit surprising because it wasn't matching up sort of like our expectations, our models of Mars, because it was clashing with other things. Not to mention, it also was suggesting that because its size was a little bigger, that there were a lot more lighter components mixed in, and it was just not making much sense. Nevertheless, people go like, hey, well, that's what we got. Like, we are getting a lot of information. Until September 18th, 2021. And so this is really cool. A meteorite hit Mars on that day. And InSight, which is there to detect any kind of rumblings, basically. So normally it detects marsquakes, and it was detecting marsquakes relatively nearby, but this meteorite actually hit a couple of 1,000 miles away. And that has dramatically altered our view of the interior of Mars. And it wasn't the only one. On December 24th or 25th, there was another meteoroid that hit on the other side as well. That was even farther away. And that is providing us information because then it can map sort of like these seismic waves going through the interior of Mars, and then InSight is detecting it.
It hit Mars on Christmas Eve, just like a Christmas present. You shake it and you can figure out what's inside it. Thank you, meteorite.
That's right. But what they found was that the core, the liquid core that I was talking about before, Mars does not have a solid core. It has a liquid core, and it turns out that it is a little bit smaller than expected. But instead, on top of that liquid core, there is a layer about close to about 100 miles or so big, thick. There is a layer of molten rock, molten magma. And that was something that is something that we don't have here on Earth at that level, sort of like, between the mantle and the liquid core. Earth doesn't have that, but on Mars, you have this different layer. And that, in some sense, solves the problem that there was before. Now you don't need to sort of like, need a lot more lighter elements, and now it kind of gives us a sense of what is going on inside Mars.
Is that why Mars lost its magnetic fields? Because of the way that its core is set up, and now this new insight into the structure of Mars explains a little bit better why Mars might have lost its magnetic field?
Well, we don't know, but that's a possibility. So this is still. So let me just place it again how science works. So a few months ago, I would say early this year, all the papers were talking about this big mystery of why its core is a little bit bigger than expected, and the challenges that come with that. And now, because of this analysis of this meteorite that actually provided us with the structure of the inside of Mars in a slightly different way, so suddenly we have different explanations. And so this current study, so this is sort of like, hot off the sort of like, research stove or whatever you want to call it. What they think is that this kind of layer of liquid molten rock that has prevented the core from cooling down further. And so this is the layer which we don't have, that perhaps this prevented the formation of a solid core, which would have caused the sort of like, or which would have created magnetic fields on Mars. So maybe that is the case, but here is a puzzle. But we do know that Mars, long time ago, did have magnetic fields on it. So then why was there magnetic field then, and how did it lose it? So there is a different type of puzzle that has come in, and people are speculating on that. And one idea is that maybe it had larger moons. Right now its moons are pretty much smaller, but maybe there were larger moons that was sort of like, that may have helped with the magnetic fields, but not now. So now we are in a different set of questions. And this is really cool for two reasons. One, you are seeing science in action, right? I mean, people say, oh, scientists don't know, they say one thing. No, but I mean, this is how you try to piece the puzzle together. And there are some things that you come to the sort of like, you come to it, well, hey, we know more and more about the picture. We may have been wrong in this way, but we may be right in the other. And the power of good theories, or power of where we are getting sort of like, good understanding, is that it doesn't just explain one thing, but it explains a lot more. And so that's where people are piecing together. But this question of what happened to Mars's magnetic field, we don't know. And that would be, I mean, that probably is already part of somebody's PhD thesis, or it's going to be in the future, because that's what you do on the PhD thesis, that you look for questions that have not been solved. It's a little bit boring if you work on things that have already been solved. But a lot more missions will be going to Mars, and we will find out a lot more. And ultimately, it was also, as an obligatory thing, I have to say, and of course it is related to whether there was life ever on Mars or not. Sure, yeah, but I mean, but give some credit to Mars just as a planet itself as well. But sure enough, habitability, that's an interesting question. Why Mars is not as lifeful. We don't know whether there is life on Mars today or not, microbes or not. Nevertheless, why it's a deader planet than Earth? Well, these may be some of the reasons.
And if you do get a present for Christmas or whatever holiday, and you want to shake it, if somebody gets mad at you, just tell them you're doing science. I learned it from shaking Mars.
And I hope there is no molten magma as a gift.
Yeah, well, that would be fun. The floor is lava is a fun game.
Well, that's true.